The grand hall of Asterion Prime shimmered with golden lights and alien beauty. Hundreds of noble warriors from different species filled the vast chamber, their armors gleaming like jewels under the shining orbs above. It was the day of the Great Alliance ceremony, the moment when soldiers from many worlds would stand together to promise peace and strength. The air carried the hum of pride and laughter, of power and elegance, and among them stood one human, Captain Elias Ward. He looked out of place, standing at the edge of the hall, quiet and still. His armor was dull gray, simple and without decoration. Compared to the shining crystal plates of the Jaren, the silver scales of the Ziran, or the glowing energy suits of the Valorians, his armor looked almost primitive. The edges were scratched, the surface burned and dented. It did not shine. It looked used, worn and heavy, like it carried more history than metal. Many in the hall whispered when they saw him. Humans were still new to the Alliance. Some races saw them as weak, too soft, too emotional, too fragile. And standing in that hall of pride, Elias looked like a relic from another age. Then a voice rang out from the grand seat at the center. It was Princess Vailira of the Jaren Dominion, tall, proud, and radiant. Her crystalline armor glowed with soft red light, her silver hair braided like streams of light. She looked at Elias with a curious smile that soon turned sharp. "Tell me, human," she said, her voice clear and sweet. "Is that truly your armor, or something your ancestors dug out from a museum?" The hall burst into laughter. Even the guards standing behind her couldn't hold back their amusement. Some aliens covered their mouths. Others didn't bother. Laughter rolled across the golden floor like waves. Elias didn't move. His face, hidden behind his simple helmet, gave no reaction. He didn't flinch or bow. He simply stood, his back straight, his breathing calm. Only his hands, folded behind his back, tightened slightly. Princess Vailira tilted her head, smiling wider. "I mean no offense," she said, though her tone was playful. "But surely the mighty humans can afford armor less." "Pathetic?" More laughter followed. The moment burned into the air like a cruel joke shared by a crowd. But still, Elias said nothing. Inside his helmet, he looked at the glowing hall, the laughter, the polished armor, the proud faces, and for a moment, his mind drifted back to Earth, to the ruins of cities, the smoke of battles and the sound of silence after war. He remembered holding a comrade's hand in the mud while bombs fell around them. He remembered the smell of dust, the weight of loss, and suddenly the laughter here felt small. He took a slow breath and spoke, his voice quiet but steady. "This armor has seen more battles than most of those shining plates around you." The laughter dimmed a little. Vailira raised a brow, her tone teasing but curious. "Is that so? Then perhaps it carries your memories, human." Elias nodded. "It does. Every dent, every mark, and a reminder of someone I couldn't save. I keep it not for show, but for memory." For a moment silence brushed through the air. Even Vailira blinked, unsure what to say. There was something in his voice, not pride, not anger, but sorrow. The kind of sorrow that only those who had seen too much could carry. Then someone from the crowd chuckled awkwardly, breaking the moment. The hall's noise returned, lighter now but still filled with mockery. Elias didn't speak again. He simply turned his gaze back to the great banners above, each one painted with colors of alien kingdoms. His own flag, the blue and white of Earth, hung small in the corner. But he stood beneath it, unmoved. To him, the laughter of the hall meant nothing. He had heard the screams of dying worlds. He had seen bravery that no jewel could match. And though no one knew it yet, the day would come when that quiet human, mocked for his dull gray armor, would make this same hall fall silent, not with laughter but with awe. That night, long after the laughter had faded from the great hall, Captain Elias Ward stood alone on the balcony of the embassy tower. The twin moons of Asterion Prime hung in the sky, one blue, one gold, bathing the city in soft light. Below him, ships glided through the air like silent birds of light, and the crystal towers reflected the colors of the stars. But Elias didn't see beauty in it. He saw ghosts. The quiet hum of the city reminded him of Earth before the war, before the skies burned red, before the streets turned to ash. He remembered the nights when he couldn't sleep, the smell of smoke, the endless sound of alarms. He remembered standing in ruined cities, watching survivors search for loved ones under broken steel, and he remembered the faces of people he couldn't save. He touched the surface of his armor. It felt cold beneath his hand, rough from age and battle. Each scratch carried a story. Each burn was a memory that refused to fade. It wasn't beautiful, but it was honest. Behind him, the door slid open with a soft hiss. Elias didn't turn. He already knew who it was. Princess Valera stepped onto the balcony, her steps light as wind. Her robes shimmered faintly, the colors of her dominion glowing like living fire, but her voice when she spoke was softer than before. "You take no offense, human?" she asked quietly. Elias turned his head slightly, enough to meet her crimson eyes through his visor. "Why should I?" he replied. "You only spoke what many were thinking." Valera frowned a little. "I didn't mean to insult your kind," she said. "I was curious. I've never seen armor like that. It looks so worn." Elias smiled faintly behind the helmet. "It is. I built it myself and on the ruins of Venera 9. Her brow furrowed. "Venera 9? That name sounds familiar." "It was one of our colonies," he said quietly. "Attacked 5 years ago. Most of the soldiers didn't make it. We fought for 3 weeks with no reinforcements, no supply lines. We used what we could find, scrap metal, old tech, broken weapons. This armor was forged there." Valera's expression softened. "And you survived?" Elias looked at the stars. "I didn't survive because I was stronger. I survived because others didn't. They gave me time to escape. Every time I put this armor on, I remember their faces. It keeps me from forgetting who I fight for." There was silence between them. The wind moved gently through the balcony, carrying the faint sound of distant music from the city below. Valera lowered her head slightly. "Your people must have suffered much." "We did," Elias said simply. "But suffering taught us something valuable. It taught us to stand again even when everything is broken. That's what being human means." Valera watched him quietly. There was something heavy in his words. Not the kind of weight that crushed, but the kind that grounded. She had lived her whole life in crystal palaces and shining halls, surrounded by strength and beauty. But this man, this human, carried strength that was invisible. For a moment she didn't know what to say. The arrogance she had shown earlier seemed childish now. "You wear it to remember?" she said softly, looking at his armor again. "Yes," he answered. "Some wear jewels to show what they've earned. I wear scars, and this armor, to remind me what I've lost." Her eyes lingered on him a moment longer. Then she gave a small bow of her head, a gesture rare for a Jaran royal. "Perhaps I judged too quickly," she said, her voice quieter now. "There is strength in you, Captain Ward. A different kind." Elias gave a faint nod, his gaze still on the stars. "One day, Princess, you'll understand that strength isn't about shining the brightest. It's about not fading when the light dies." Valera said nothing more. She turned and walked away, the sound of her footsteps fading into the night. Elias remained where he was, standing under the cold twin moons, his hand resting on the armor that carried the stories of a dying world. And somewhere deep inside, he hoped that maybe, just maybe one day, someone would see what humans truly were. Not fragile, not weak, but survivors 2 nights later. The great hall was alive with energy. This time the air was different. Instead of laughter and whispers, it hummed with anticipation and tension. Today was the combat demonstration, a test of skill and strength meant to honor the alliance, but also to show the power of each warrior. All the nobility and military leaders had gathered again, their eyes bright with expectation. The floor of the hall was cleared, a glowing circle marking the arena. Around it, hundreds of warriors stood, each proud of their training, each confident in their power. Captain Elias Ward entered last as the human representative. He walked steadily, his gray armor dull but firm under the bright lights. The other warriors glanced at him with curiosity, amusement, and in some cases pity. To them he looked small. His armor looked weaker. His frame looked fragile. At the center of the arena waited Princess Valyra. She stood tall, her crystalline armor gleaming like molten ruby. Her spear sparkled with energy, the blade alive with light. When she saw Elias, her lips curved into a teasing smile. "You, human," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the hall. "Stand here to face me? Are you sure your armor can survive?" The crowd laughed quietly at first. The sound was soft, but it carried the same ridicule from before. Elias did not answer. He simply nodded once and adjusted his stance. The floor beneath him reflected the dull gray of his armor, but his eyes, steady behind his visor, reflected a resolve that no light could hide. The duel began. Valyra moved first, her spear slicing through the air with breathtaking speed. Sparks flew as it struck the edges of Elias's armor. He blocked, twisted, and dodged with precision, his movements calculated, almost silent. Every strike that hit. His armor thudded with force, yet he remained standing. The hall gasped. Valyra's attacks became sharper, faster. Her speed was unmatched, and yet the human adapted. Each move he made was smaller than hers, but filled with purpose. He bent, ducked, pivoted, letting her strength run into the armor, absorbing it, controlling it, surviving it. Minutes passed. Sweat formed along her brow, though it never dulled her fierce eyes. Elias, meanwhile, remained steady. The dents in his armor rattled slightly, but he did not stumble. The crowd's laughter began to fade, replaced by murmurs of surprise. Some of the alien generals exchanged uneasy glances. The human, small and plain in appearance, was not just surviving. He was enduring. Valyra's frustration grew. She had expected a quick victory, a display of her superiority. But this human refused to falter. Every strike she delivered was met with calm resistance. Every movement he made was measured, careful, deliberate. Finally, with a powerful thrust, Valyra's spear struck his chest plate with full force. The impact drove him back, knocking him to one knee. Gasps echoed throughout the hall. Many expected him to fall completely, defeated and humiliated. Instead, he stayed upright. His helmet reflected the brilliant lights above, but the human behind it did not move. His chest rose and fell, steady and strong. Valyra stepped closer, her voice sharper now, tinged with frustration. "Perhaps your human courage ends here," she said, her spear poised. Elias looked up at her slowly, his voice calm, even gentle. "Not courage," he said quietly. "Memory." The words hung in the air like a weight. Valyra blinked, unsure how to respond. The hall, too, seemed to pause, as if sensing the meaning behind them. Elias reached up and began unfastening the straps of his armor. The sound was subtle at first, then louder with each piece dropping to the floor. Shoulder plates, chest plate, gauntlets. The dull gray pieces fell with finality, and with that, the first true silence of the day began to settle over the great hall. Elias's hands moved slowly but deliberately as he loosened the straps of his armor. The hum of the crowd faded into silence, though no one could yet understand why. Every warrior in the hall had expected him to struggle, to flinch, to collapse under the princess's final strike. Instead, he stood, unafraid, methodical. First went the shoulder plates. They hit the floor with a dull clang, echoing against the stone walls. Gasps began to ripple through the crowd. Some of the younger soldiers whispered nervously, unsure what they were witnessing. Then the chest plate, the central piece of his armor, came free. The dull gray metal clattered to the floor. The sound seemed to carry weight beyond mere metal, a story of endurance, of survival, of memory. Finally, Elias removed his gauntlets and helmet. The great hall held its breath. The once mocking princess, Valyra, stopped mid-step, her crimson eyes wide, as she had expected a human to be ordinary, fragile, unremarkable. She had not expected this. Before them stood a man, not the image of perfection or polished strength, but something far more powerful. His body was marked with scars. Deep ones, thin ones, jagged lines and faded burns covered his chest and arms. Old surgeries left neat, white marks where his flesh had been stitched. Every scar told a story of battles fought, friends lost, and life clung to despite impossible odds. The room was silent. Even the nobles, proud and arrogant in their jeweled armor, could not bring themselves to speak. Elias took a deep breath. His voice, calm and measured, carried through the stillness. "These," he said, tapping his chest lightly, "are my medals. My people didn't have shields like yours. We didn't fight with glowing swords or energy blades. We fought with our hands, our hearts, and our courage. Every scar is a memory, a reminder of someone I couldn't save, someone who gave me time to survive." Valyra's spear lowered slightly. Her lips parted, but no words came. She had mocked him once. Now the sight of his scars, his quiet bravery, left her breathless. The arrogance that had been so natural for her seemed fragile in comparison to the human standing before her. Elias continued, voice steady, almost gentle. "You laughed at my armor because it looked weak, but you cannot see the strength beneath. Strength is not the metal you wear. Strength is surviving when the world expects you to fall. Strength is standing again when everything is broken. That is what humans do." A soft murmur spread through the hall. Some of the alien generals shifted uncomfortably. The soldiers who had whispered moments ago now held their breath. Even the High Chancellor, seated upon his throne of crystal, leaned forward slightly, eyes fixed on Elias. Valyra took another step back. She had expected a duel of speed, power, and skill. A performance, a display of strength. Instead, she saw raw truth. This human had endured horrors no polished armor could ever hide, and he wore his scars like a crown. Elias looked around, the hall slowly, meeting the eyes of every noble, every warrior. He did not boast. He did not demand respect. He simply let the truth speak for itself. "The strength you see in your armor," he said quietly, "is nothing compared to the strength it takes to face every day after loss. Humans do not shine. We endure. And that endurance, that unbroken spirit, is something no blade, no shield, no crystal plating can give." The hall remained silent. The silence was not tense. It was reverent. The laughter, the mockery, the prideful whispers, all of it had vanished, replaced by awe. Princess Valyra finally found her voice soft and low. I did not understand." Elias gave a small nod. "Now you do." For the first time, the princess bowed her head, a gesture of honor rare in her world. And in that moment, the human standing bare-chested, scarred, and unbroken had not only silenced the hall, he had taught it humility, respect, and a new understanding of true strength. For a long moment the great hall remained motionless. The echoes of Elias Ward's words and the sight of his scars hung in the air like a heavy, invisible fog. No one moved. No one breathed too loudly. Even the distant hum of the ceremonial light seemed to pause. The nobles and warriors who had been mocking him moments before now looked at him with a mixture of shock and awe. The human they had expected to falter, to stumble, to embarrass himself in front of the Alliance, had instead revealed something far more powerful: truth. The Princess Valera stood frozen, her spear still lowered, her hands trembling ever so slightly. She had seen countless warriors in her life, all polished, trained, and flawless. None had ever stood bare like this, and commanded respect without words, without display, without pretension. Whispers began to ripple through the hall, low and uncertain at first. "Look at him, those scars," one alien general said, his voice breaking the silence. Another shook his scaled head, muttering, "I've never seen courage like that." Elias did not move. He remained in the center of the arena, chest rising and falling steadily. His scars were not wounds anymore. They were symbols of survival, of endurance, of humanity's quiet strength. A young Valorian soldier, barely trained and full of bravado, stepped forward. He had come to watch the duel expecting entertainment, expecting to see a human humiliated. Instead, he felt a strange pull: respect, admiration, and something he had never understood before. He bowed his head slightly, almost instinctively. Valera finally broke her silence, her voice softer than anyone had ever heard it. "Captain Ward, I mocked you for what I did not understand. I mistook simplicity for weakness, scars for imperfection." She paused, gathering courage. "But you have shown me the truth. You are stronger than any armor I have ever worn." Elias nodded once, acknowledging her words without pride. "Strength is not in the shine of your armor or the length of your blade. It is in standing again when the world expects you to fall. Humans survive because we have no choice, and we fight because someone must." The hall seemed to shift. Even the most arrogant nobles straightened in their seats, staring at the human who had defied their expectations. For the first time, they saw beyond his plain gray armor. They saw the weight of his experiences, the courage of his people, and the depth of human resilience. One of the high chancellors, a stern Zeran with armor of iridescent blue, rose slowly from his throne. His voice, deep and commanding, filled the hall. "Let it be known," he said, "that the human captain Elias Ward has proven courage and honor beyond measure. His armor is not weak. It is history. His scars are not imperfections. They are proof of endurance." The crowd murmured again, this time in agreement. The laughter that had echoed earlier was gone. It was replaced by respect, silence, and the dawning understanding that the human standing before them was unlike any other. Valera lowered her spear completely and took a step closer. "I bow to you, Captain Ward," she said, voice firm now. "Not because of strength you display, but because of the strength that cannot be worn or stolen. You are a warrior in every sense of the word." Elias looked around the hall, his gaze calm. He knew that none of this applause or recognition mattered as much as the lessons his people had taught him. Courage is not measured in appearances. Victory is not in display, and true strength comes from the heart. He replaced his armor slowly, piece by piece, his movements deliberate and steady. Each plate was a reminder of what he had survived, each strap a symbol of the humanity that carried him through countless battles. When the final piece was in place, he looked up at the crowd once more. Silence remained, but it was a silence full of reverence, a silence that spoke louder than any cheer, a silence that honored not just him but the spirit of an entire species. And in that moment, Captain Elias Ward understood that he had changed their perception forever. The human they had laughed at was now the standard of courage, endurance, and unbreakable spirit, a quiet legend born from scars, memory, and heart. The great hall of Asterion Prime had changed. The laughter that had once filled the air was replaced with quiet reverence. Warriors and nobles alike stood in a new light, their gazes fixed on Captain Elias Ward. What they had thought was weakness had become awe. What they had considered fragile had become courage. Princess Valera, still standing near the center, stared at him. She had lived her entire life in the brilliance of her crystal palace, surrounded by warriors who dazzled with strength and speed. Yet none of them had ever moved her the way this human had. He had not boasted. He had not screamed. He had simply removed his armor and revealed the truth, the quiet, unshakable strength that came from survival, from memory, and from heart. For Valera, something inside her shifted. She lowered her spear completely, folding her hands before her. She stepped forward, hesitant at first, then with purpose. "Captain Ward," she said softly, "I see now that strength is not always measured by shining armor or a powerful weapon. True strength is endurance, courage, and the willingness to face loss and keep standing." Elias nodded once. His expression was calm, almost gentle. But there was a weight behind his eyes. The weight of every battle, every life lost, every scar earned. "It is not about being stronger than others," he said. "It is about being stronger than fear, than pain, than the impossible odds. That is what humans do." Valera felt her chest tighten. She had once mocked him for his simple gray armor, for his small size compared to other warriors. Now she understood the depth of her mistake. In that moment she felt humility, a rare and uncomfortable feeling for someone born into royalty and power. The rest of the hall began to murmur, quietly at first. Some of the younger nobles exchanged looks of amazement. Soldiers who had doubted him now whispered in awe. The Zarin generals, with their towering frames and glowing armor, nodded respectfully. Even the High Chancellor of the Council, seated on his crystal throne, allowed himself a faint smile. One of the elder Valorians stepped forward, his voice shaking slightly. "I have fought for decades," he said, "and I have never seen endurance like this. The human captain has taught us more than any lesson in strategy or skill ever could." Elias simply nodded, not with pride, but with quiet acknowledgement. He knew he had already done more than survive a duel. He had opened the eyes of an entire hall to what humans were truly capable of. Not glory, not power, not perfection, but resilience, courage, and heart. Valera approached him fully, her voice now steady and firm. "Your people have endured horrors that others cannot imagine. You carry their memory with you, and it gives you a strength that cannot be taken." She paused, her eyes meeting his. "I am honored to witness it." Elias's gaze softened, but he said nothing. Actions, not words, had always carried the weight for humans. Today it was enough that they understood. Slowly he began to refasten his armor. Each plate clicked into place with purpose, not vanity. His gauntlets, chest plate, and finally helmet returned, but they no longer felt like simple protection. They were a testament, a symbol of courage that had humbled a hall of warriors. The hall remained quiet, but the silence was full of meaning. No one laughed. No one mocked. They watched the human stand tall, armored yet vulnerable, a living reminder of endurance and sacrifice. Valera stepped back slightly, feeling a mixture of awe and respect she had never known before. For the first time, she realized that true leadership, true heroism, and true strength were not about appearances or weapons. They were about heart, memory, and the will to carry on when the world had fallen apart. And in that moment, Captain Elias Ward became more than a soldier. He became a legend, not because he had defeated anyone, but because he had revealed the depth of humanity. A legend that would echo in the halls of Asterion Prime and beyond, reminding everyone that courage is found in scars, in memory, and in the quiet, unyielding spirit of those who refuse to break. The great hall of Asterion Prime had never felt so quiet, yet so full of meaning. The echoes of Elias Ward's quiet courage lingered like a melody that refused to fade. Every noble, soldier, and ambassador present that day had seen something rare. A human who did not boast, who did not seek glory yet commanded respect with nothing but truth. Valira, standing near the edge of the arena, watched him with a mixture of awe and humility. She had spent her life surrounded by warriors who wore strength like jewelry, who measured their worth in shining armor and skill with weapons. Yet none had ever moved her the way this human had. Elias had revealed something far greater: the invisible power of endurance, of heart, of survival against impossible odds. He replaced the final piece of his armor slowly, deliberately. Each click, each strap felt heavier than metal. It was the weight of memory, of battles fought, of comrades lost, of a people who refused to give up. The hall watched in silence. No cheers were needed. No words could match the quiet power of what had been shown. The High Chancellor, who rarely spoke without ceremony, finally rose. His voice was deep, resonant, carrying through the hall. Let this day be remembered, not for displays of crystal or steel, not for the brilliance of weapons, but for the courage that stands when all else falls. Captain Elias Ward of Earth has shown us the truth of strength. It is endurance, it is heart, it is memory carried through fire and loss. Whispers of agreement swept through the hall. Even those who had mocked him moments ago bowed their heads. Some younger soldiers wiped their eyes quietly, overwhelmed by the power of human resilience. Valira stepped forward once more, placing her hand lightly on the hilt of her lowered spear. Captain Ward, she said softly, I laughed at your armor once. I thought it weak, but now I understand. Strength is not measured in shine, in size, or in speed. It is measured in the will to continue, in the courage to endure, and in the heart that refuses to break. Elias nodded. It is not only mine, he said quietly. It belongs to my people. Every scar, every moment of survival, every loss we carry. It is theirs, and theirs alone. We endure because we must, and we fight because someone has to. Valira lowered her head, eyes glistening. Then you are not just a soldier, human. You are the embodiment of your people's spirit. I am honored to witness it. The hall remained silent, but it was a silence filled with respect, awe, and understanding. Every warrior present had learned something that could not be taught by manuals, drills, or weapons. They had learned the value of heart, of memory, of the courage that does not rely on glittering armor or glowing blades. Elias turned toward the doors of the hall, his steps calm and unhurried. He knew that his role had not ended with this demonstration. His people's reputation, their place among the stars, had shifted. Humans would no longer be seen as fragile newcomers. They would be remembered as survivors, as warriors who carried not only weapons but scars and stories. Years later, in the wars to come, the Alliance would call upon the humans first. They would stand in the front lines, not because they were the largest, not because they were the fastest, but because they would endure when all others faltered. And at their center, Elias Ward would lead, a man of scars, of memory, of heart. Even Valira, now an ally and friend, would recall the day he removed his armor. She would tell her children of the human who silenced a hall of kings without a word, who taught a galaxy what true courage looked like. In the records of the Alliance, the portrait remained. Elias Ward, bare-chested and scarred, standing proud and unbroken. Beneath it, in every language of every world, the words were written, Strength is not what protects the body. Strength is what survives without protection. And so the legend of the human captain endured, not because he wielded weapons, or commanded armies, or shone like the stars, but because he reminded the galaxy that true strength lies in endurance, memory, heart, and the unyielding spirit of those who refuse to break. The Great Hall had laughed at him once, but when he removed his armor, it had learned to bow.